Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to another edition of World Talks here on TVP World, where every word matters. I'm your host, Benjamin Lee, and please join me and my guests on this next interview. Now, as world leaders engage in high-stakes diplomacy, Poland's President Andrzej Duda, the UK's Prime Minister Keir Starmer, and France's President Emmanuel Macron are set to visit the United States for critical talks. With the war in Ukraine at a pivotal moment, can these discussions bring concrete solutions to end the conflict? Meanwhile, new reports suggest that Russia may be open to using frozen sovereign assets for Ukraine's reconstruction, but with conditions. Joining us today on TVP World to explore these developments is Ireneusz Bil, chairman of the board at the Amicus Europae Foundation. Hello, sir, and welcome to TVP World.
Thank you very much for the invitation, and good evening to everyone.
So when it comes to these high-stakes talks, do you think there's a possibility that a unified strategy actually emerging from these meetings?
Well, certainly the approaching week is a very tense pact with diplomatic missions and diplomatic meetings, especially for the US president. From the Polish perspective, it's a very good sign that he starts with the Polish president. I think exactly now he's having the meeting. Well, it would be a very difficult task for a row of European leaders to convince the US president to their point of view. The Polish president, I think, has a very simple mission. He has, and this is a good sign, a very high credibility at the US president because he was the one who was supporting him politically in the past. So I think his message and his mission is simple. He wants to make a deal done, Trump. So for Duda is to push him into the proper direction towards a just deal.
All right. Do you think there's any specific outcomes that we can sort of expect? Do you think, like you mentioned, President Duda's personal relation with Donald Trump might be able to eke something out from Trump that is more favorable to Ukraine than previous?
Well, hopefully, but having in mind how a difficult personality Donald Trump is, I would not expect changing his mind within a week. I think it's a more or less consultations with several leaders, I think pivotal leaders. Both of them, Keir Starmer and Emmanuel Macron, of course, has some leverage because it would be, they declared this would be mainly the French and the British soldiers who would be possibly sent to Ukraine within the European peace mission. So, of course, they have a leverage, and they will certainly convey to the US president that what was discussed in Paris among the European leaders. So I think the message will be very much straightforward. It has to be a just deal, a deal that will give also some security guarantees to Ukraine, because it cannot be just a ceasefire that will result that within a couple of next years we will have another invasion of Russia.
Right, like I mentioned, a security guarantee of some sort is very important right now. And well, UK under the leadership of Keir Starmer also seems to be putting very strong rhetoric when it comes to helping Ukraine achieve that. Do you think that this might be able to shift the dynamic for support for Kyiv from the British side?
Well, this might play a role because we know about the special relationship between the UK and US, which was established after the Second World War. I think it's still valid, and there are very close ties between the establishments of both countries. So I think the message from London will be extremely important. But again, I doubt whether the conviction of Trump, who wants a deal done and a quick deal, go along with that what will be presented from London.
All right.
So,
like you mentioned, President Duda has a pretty strong position coming into this, well, at least when it comes to swaying Trump's mind. And that leads me to also France's Emmanuel Macron. We do know that he is already facing a little bit of his own political issues within France. Do you think that might affect his effectiveness when it comes to going into these negotiations, seeing that he might not have that much sway within his own country?
Certainly it might. There's no good track record in the political relations between Trump and Macron. Yeah. Macron used to criticize very heftily US President Trump when he was president for the first time. So I think it might be a problem, but nevertheless France has certain assets and certain leverages. Also his initiative and his initiative to organize the meeting, I think it's also could be an asset for Trump, because he needs someone strong in Europe. Poland is, I think, not enough, and Duda is not enough. So both the European leaders could play a role in organizing the Europeans around a peace deal that Trump is seeking.
Right. And I would also turn our attention to Russia, where they reported openness to using frozen assets. I have trouble believing that it's an indication of softening a position. Or do you think this is more of a strategic ploy of some sorts?
Well, I think I would describe it as a poisoned offer. Because on the one hand, it's a good sign because it symbolizes and signals that Russia and Moscow has to some extent accepted already and see it as inevitable that these assets will be seized if they are offering that they want to a share in it. But on the other hand, it's also, of course, a poisoned offer because if the West would agree, it would mean that we would also sanction the incorporation of these territories into Russia itself. So I think it is not something that has been discussed yet, and I think it's not in the interest of the international order to sanction such a land grab by Russia. And I think this is a very dangerous offer from this perspective.
Right. Can you help us break that down a little bit? Because I feel like there's probably layers to this. Like you mentioned, this isn't just coming out of Russia's goodwill, but with the way these sort of sanctions work, how do you see the Russians trying to play this?
Well, I'm certain that one of the most painful things that they want to abolish within a possible deal with Trump is, of course, the sanctions. Right. They want to get rid of them as soon as possible. Mm-hmm. But within I think they recognize that the seizure of assets is a very important topic that even the Europeans within the Americans can push through. So this offer, which is more, I think, done versus Trump than versus the European Union, is something that they mean for real. As a offer which Trump might accept and might also try to force the Europeans somehow to treat very seriously.
Right. It does seem like Russians are playing its relationship with the United States quite well here. And there's also this other request where Moscow demands that part of the fund go to territories under Russian control. So how does that even work for Moscow?
Well, this is what I refer to. They occupy territories. They want this money back. So it means, Phil, this is our money, but let's have a share in it. But the poisoned offer within is that this is still Ukrainian territory. Nobody has ceded them to it. So directing this money and channeling this money into into the Russian pocket is something that I think nobody is now ready to discuss. And of course, Trump, this is plan B for Russia, definitely. They've been struggling for 3 years, having only incremental gains on the battlefront. So now when Trump was elected, finally, it's a big success, seen as a big success in Russia, a new window of opportunity. So I'm certain that Moscow will try to utilize as much as possible this opportunity, try to gain politically, and trying to force Trump to put pressure on the Europeans, on Zelensky, to get the deal done. It was difficult, it was impossible for Russia to do it, but they know that Trump has much more leverage than Moscow, of course.
Right, and do you think that accepting this condition would also come into the concern of potentially legitimizing Russia's territorial claim and set some sort of precedent that essentially is acknowledging that these are Russian land?
Exactly. This is a backdoor policy in this offer, a backdoor which Russia indirectly tries to already start the discussions with Trump and with the West about formalizing the annexation of these territories. Because, as we remember, even Crimea, which was annexed 2014, was not recognized by any country in the West.
All right, so yeah, now this paints a bigger picture of realistically what Moscow wants to achieve. Like you mentioned, this is a poisonous deal that perhaps isn't just as easy as is seen on the surface. But when it comes to utilizing these frozen Russian assets, is there any other way to achieve using the Russian assets and using it for the reconstruction of Ukraine after the war?
I think this first step was already done. So the first step was about the using of the interest from these frozen assets to finance the support to Ukraine. So if we are able to overcome some opposition in, let's say, the countries who oppose, for example, Germany, then we'll be able not only to channel this money for reconstruction, but even for supporting the war effort of Ukraine. Because I think this war will not end in 2025, despite all these efforts. So probably new finances will be needed. So Russia sees it. Sees and tries to somehow contradict it, going already to the next step, so starting formal negotiations about this.
Speaking of next step and negotiations, there's also talks about potentially another round of meeting between Russians and President Trump, but again, without the involvement of Ukraine, unfortunately. But do you think this time around, with these foreign leaders coming to meet Trump and negotiating and talking to him directly, would perhaps sway his perspective a little bit, and maybe he'll go into this second round of discussion with more information of what's really going on the ground?
The second round of discussion in Riyadh, I think, is already set, as I've heard about the date of 21st of February, so almost symbolic that the 24th was the beginning of the invasion 3 years ago. So I would not expect very much progress in these discussions, because the American team is very much inexperienced. General Kellogg, who is now in Kyiv, was sidelined in these discussions, which also signal an internal split in the U.S. administration. I think also the U.S. team is not very much briefed to what Trump really wants, and his timetable that Trump is envisaging puts a lot of pressure on the U.S. team. So of course there will be the discussions. In the last communique from the meeting, the most important point was the point number 3, which referred to considering both sides of economic and geopolitical opportunities from the cooperation between the United States and Russia. And I think this is something that Russia will try to push further, to attract Donald Trump with some concessions that could be attractive to him, that could guarantee him some ingredients and some benefits in a quick deal, from a quick deal.
Right, this seems to play into the Russian strategy. And do you think at any point, though, with these presidents, prime ministers going to meet Trump, and we also have the Polish foreign minister now talking to Marco Rubio, that could give any sway with the benefit of Ukraine?
This will be a very important litmus test, how much Trump can be influenced by foreign leaders. Because all these names that we are speaking about, well, I think are those who have the most leverage over Trump. Both have political friends like President Duda and, well, heavy figures from European politics. So if after this week, if we'll see that Trump alters his position, that he is somehow being influenced by this, what the European countries are saying, what the allies are saying, this would be a good sign. But whether it will translate into the negotiations with Russia, because Russia will do the same. They will convey their messages to the ear of Trump, because I think the meeting between Trump and Putin is also approaching. It will be held probably in March, and Putin will have his opportunity to put his argument in the forefront.
Right, like you said, this might be a litmus test going forward, and we'll have to see how it develops. In the meantime, thank you so much for your input and insight. Really appreciate it.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And thank you for watching this edition of World Talks. Before more news, update, and commentary, please stay tuned to TVP World.